Hello friends, for today's video we are going to be looking at my top 3 reads from the second quarter of the year. As always, I like to differentiate between my top new fantasy releases versus my top either backlist fantasy or works from other genres, just to ensure that one, I am able to sort of shed some light on both areas, but also it keeps my reading balanced between the newer and the older. If you are more interested in the new fantasy, I will have that up very soon. For today, we are going to be focusing on the other area I described, and it just so happens this go around that all of my favorites from the second quarter happened to be fantasy, but they're all different subgenres of fantasy, which I found to be really, really fun, and it was such a great way to feel like I got an enriching experience out of the fantasy backlist books I picked up. And we're going to be exploring one that is epic fantasy, one that is historical fantasy, and then one that is a grim fairy tale retelling. For all 3 of the books we're going to be discussing, I did go more in depth in other videos. This is going to serve sort of more as an overview. If you're somebody who prefers more overview style so you don't feel like you know too much, then hopefully this will provide that. But if you are, after hearing about these today, looking for more in-depth, then I'll have my previous videos linked. The 3 books we'll be talking about though would be the 13th Child, Children of Gods and Fighting Men, and Dragon Mage. Dragon Mage I've talked about a lot since I picked it up, and as such, you've probably already heard about it. I'm going to start with this one. There will be timestamps for all 3 of these, but I'm going to start with this one, and if you're like, I've heard you talk about it enough already, then you can just go ahead and jump straight to the next one. Setup for Dragon Mage is that you have these 2 boys, Aram and Marcus, who end up being very, very good friends. Aram is somebody who very clearly recognizes that he does not necessarily process things or behave in ways that are similar to other boys and other children in general his age. In fact, he doesn't really feel like most people understand him. And what makes his friendship with Marcus so beautiful is that Marcus is somebody who recognizes that who cares if you don't necessarily act the same way and think the same way, you still have a lot of value and you're an incredible person in general. Of course I'll be your friend. And it's just really precious to watch their interactions as boys, but also you not only become so invested in the 2 of them right away, but you feel so strongly when danger comes knocking, which it does pretty quickly, because they live in this small sort of remote village. I said before, it kind of is more of that classic epic fantasy feel. So yes, you are looking at these 2 young boys in this sort of little village tucked away in this faraway place. And danger comes knocking when some very powerful people catch wind of magic being used. And the reason that this is significant is because in their world, there are threats to their society that come from things kind of coming through what they refer to as the veil. And so these things that come through, the only way to fight back against those is through magic, but most magic users have been dying out. However, there are some people have the ability to use magic, they just don't have it in themselves. So what the solution has unfortunately been is to, whenever they find somebody who has magic within them, they capture them, they extract their magic, and they apply it to the individuals who can use it. They just can't produce it, and those individuals are known as sorcerers. And it turns out that between Aram and Marcus, one of them is somebody who has magic, one of them is actually immune to the effects of magic, which are also considered vital as they end up becoming bodyguards for the sorcerers. And you sort of see the sorcerers as antagonists because you see them as threats to not only Aram and Marcus as individuals, but their friendship. And when you are seeing that, you think, well, I don't like them because they're going to tear them apart and they're going to do horrible things to one of them. But at the same time, the reason the stakes are so well established is because you recognize that this is necessary to some degree. You don't really know what the solution is, because if something bad doesn't happen to this one person, then really bad things will happen to everyone. And it's a horrible conundrum that the characters are finding themselves in, that you as a reader are finding yourself in, because you don't want these tough decisions to have to be made and you don't really want to face them either. But as the story progresses, you're discovering more about these threats from beyond the veil. You're discovering more about the lore and what they've been told. Is it propaganda or is it truth? And also you are seeing the ways that these 2 friends are pulled apart and come back together, and I thought it was really, really exceptional. I really enjoyed, just in general, getting engrossed in this story and discovering more and more. If I have one, I guess you could say, criticism, it's that I liked so many aspects of this story that sometimes certain things would happen and I wanted to spend more time with those things. And so I actually think that even though this first book is very, very long, I almost wish it was split apart and that then we could spend even more time with certain chunks of time, because you do see these boys grow into young men. And sometimes I wanted to just take a back seat and allow, because I was really enjoying this world, I wanted to get even more. But that's a I mean, that's not really a criticism. It's more of just like, could this have been even longer because I liked it so much? But it did mean that there were certain things with the lore that I think I would have enjoyed even more time with. In general, if you really enjoyed that more classic fantasy feel, but you like the idea of bringing to the table something that's a little bit more unique and fresh and different, then I think there's a really good chance that you're going to like this, especially because not only did I think the representation with Aram was fantastic, but I absolutely loved the friendship between these two characters. Next up, we have the Children of Gods and Fighting Men. And I ended up reading this at the very, very end of the quarter, and it very quickly turned into a standout read, not just for the quarter, but for the whole year. Maybe the last few years. I really, really liked this one. I cannot wait to keep going with the series to a point where I'm like, I don't think I can wait till this next quarter, because I already kind of compiled my list of things that I want to get around to in quarter 3, and I'm like, I might have to move some things around or just read a lot, because even though my TBR is already massive, I'm like, I gotta fit the sequels in. I liked it that much. I don't want to have to wait. And it is historical fantasy for me, basically at its finest. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The setup for the story is that you follow these two women, both of whom are very much entrenched within the goings-on of powerful people. So one particular character, she, at a very young age, was married off to an elderly king, and it is historical fantasy, so you are primarily looking actually at Ireland. And she was married off to this king, he died, she had a child with him, and now pretty much the only thing she cares about is this child. But you also see the ways that she has been sort of told by society, and also through her experiences time and time again, that the only way to be secure and comfortable in life is if you have power. And because she cares so strongly about her son, all she pretty much aims to do is attain power for him. She recognizes that she doesn't necessarily have the ability to attain much power for herself as a woman, so she's constantly trying to manipulate other people and try to twist things and get people to go against each other, get people to ally with other people. Whatever she sees as a machination to benefit her and her son, she's going to go for that. And she also just wants her son to have a certain level of power, and in her mind she tells herself it's because she cares about him and she wants him to be protected. But you also can see the ways that I think she feels robbed of the fact that she knows she's smarter than a lot of other people. She knows that she's more capable, and so she has to take what she can, but I think there's this frustration that she can't have it for herself, so she kind of has to take it from the shadows, if you will. And part of why she has this idea in her mind that she has to constantly crave power is that she is a part of a group of individuals who actually live for extraordinarily long amounts of time and also have the ability to use fire magic. However, they have had to keep this a secret as much as possible because of the fact that this group of people has been hunted down and mostly eliminated. It's believed by their adversaries that they have been wiped out, and she has to keep this a secret because if she uses her powers, if she reveals who she is and what she is, then it's going to be known very quickly to the people that hunt her kind that she exists. And even though she could use this power to try to gain more power, she also knows it's going to put a target on her back, and she's likely going to die very quickly because the opposing group has powers of their own, and their powers are more witch oriented. And there's more variety, so rather than just living long lives, which they do, they also don't necessarily have fire magic, but rather illusion magic or magic that has to do more with the earth. And there seems to be some aspects to them that is tying back to lore that has affected the humans. They seem to have, I talked about with the first character, how she tries to take power from the shadows. They don't try to take it for individuals, but as a group, they are constantly influencing the wars of men and the ways that people progress in society and who gets on the throne. But they tell themselves they're just observing. And you're like, no, you're not. You're totally getting invested in everything that's going on. And there's a character within this group that doesn't really want to get involved in the affairs of humans. She is grieving the loss of a child, and she is just trying to figure out how to live life, but all she really wants to do is live in the woods and practice healing magic and be by herself, essentially. And also she loves her sister very, very much. But at some point, something happens that puts her sister in danger, and as a way to kind of make her conform, her group of people who are not getting involved in the affairs of humans want her to go spy so she can report back on the affairs of humans. And she essentially kind of has been strong-armed into this so as to protect her sister. So she doesn't really want to do this, but she goes for it. And what I like is how different these two characters are, because of the fact that one is constantly trying to gain power and the way that the other one doesn't really want anything to do with it, but they both get swept up in the things that are transpiring. So it's not just historical fantasy, but also there is a lot to do with the politics and constant scheming, not just from characters that you follow, but also there's characters you hear about scheming, and then they're trying to figure out if the scheming is true or if it's just trying to be a play, and if it's trying to force somebody's hand. And I love intrigue that's developed in that way. I also think this is a story that, while there are action scenes and there are battles, I wouldn't say it feels action-packed and fast-paced in the traditional sense. I think it is more the constant, like, what's going to happen. And I felt like this author was masterful at the dynamics that were so well established between characters and the characterization from one to the next. Because there would be characters that were briefly mentioned and you would have one conversation between a protagonist and that character, and then you remember that character for the rest of the book. You know everything about them just from this one interaction, which I thought was incredible. So no, it's kind of a strange compliment, but it was a very efficiently told book. But that's not to say that everything was just surface level. We're trying to pack everything in an efficient way. It just felt like the characterization was just that good. I devoured it. I absolutely loved this book. I did not want to put it down. I was sad when it was over. And there were a lot of times that I was like, if this, I think I said this in my review before, but I was like, if this person dies about certain people and certain characters, and you have things that you want to have happen, but because you want it, you're like, there's no way it's going to happen, because of course it's not, because they're going to take it from me. And I was just so invested in it. I absolutely loved it. I think if you're in the mood for a fantastic historical fantasy, then check this one out. It's so good. Last for today, we have The 13th Child. And this author has kind of built their career off of writing horror fantasy, and thus far, the first ones that I have read were more, I think, comfortably falling under young adult horror fantasy, whereas this one, while I still think it is categorized as that, I actually think there's a lot of adult fantasy readers that would enjoy this one as well. If you find that you think YA tends to be a little bit younger than what you're looking for, which of course it is literally, because it's for a younger target demographic, but sometimes people like to dip their toes in. This is one that I think kind of sits comfortably on that line where I think young adult fantasy readers would enjoy it. People who are adults who also like reading young adult might enjoy it. And then if you're somebody who's neither of those two things and you typically read adult fantasy, there's still a good chance that you might like this one if the synopsis sounds like your cup of tea. So the setup is that you're following this young girl who her whole life she has lived within this family that is too big. She is the 13th child, and as such, her family doesn't really have enough to go around, and that comes to love, support, affection, food. They're pretty much growing up in poverty. They have each other, they have certain siblings that kind of group into sections, and our main character is just somebody who's kind of forgotten and left behind, and her life is just to be in the background for the most part. But she's been promised to this mysterious individual. She has this foster father, basically, that she keeps thinking they're going to take me away and then my life is going to be better. And she just doesn't really know when that's going to happen, but she keeps hoping it will because she is tired of being in the background. And one day this individual shows up and they are essentially father death. And so when they take her in, her world gets flipped upside down because they are basically like this godlike being, and their understanding of human emotions is not exactly what she's accustomed to, and so they try, but they also don't have a good grasp on time, and so she ends up being neglected again, and so you're kind of exploring this very lonely life that this character is living. However, she also is getting to know Father Death a little bit more, and she cares for him, and she can tell that he cares for her in his own way. But even though the story is looking at this dynamic, this sort of paternal dynamic with the girl and this man, you do find that even though he's not human, there are aspects to their relationship that I think a lot of people can extrapolate and apply to relationships they've had. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a parental figure and a child, although it could be. But there are aspects between their relationship. It could be a person and their friend, a person and a romantic partner, or a person and a parent. There's just a lot of aspects to their relationship that I don't want to get too into, but thematically, I was really impressed with the fact that it wasn't the forefront of the story, but there were so many things about that were within the context of a bigger plot, and I thought it was really well done. Now, getting further into, if you hear little tippy tappies, my dog just entered the room, so she's setting down. Anyway, so I get distracted because she's adorable, and I love her. So getting back, though, to the plot of the story is that once she has been essentially adopted by Father Death, she is being taught the ways of healing, and she's learning about herbs and how to help a person get better. And she also is given this ability of when a person is too far gone, when it's not going to do any good to try to help them, all you can really do is help them pass on peacefully. And she is not necessarily sure if she's comfortable with this ability, and also she doesn't always believe it could be true. She wants to know if maybe she can push back against fate, but by pushing back against fate, she is kind of defying what it feels like is the will of Father Death. And I thought the way that that progressed into, of all things, a political scenario was really fascinating to watch unfold. It's actually a very quietly sad story, but also there are aspects to it that show her being quietly resilient and the way that she was kind of powerful in her own right, even within areas where she shouldn't have had a lot of power. She's just, when she's around humans, she's just a healer. Especially when she's around nobility, she's just a person. She doesn't really have a lot of say in anything. She just has to try to get by on her areas of expertise. And then, of course, being a human, kind of pushing back against the will of this godlike being and other godlike beings that exist as well. She's somebody who just finds ways to be compassionate, but have this strength that is somewhat subdued, but is still present. And I really, really liked her as a character. While by no means is the romantic subplot that much of a focus, I also really liked the way that the romantic subplot in this was done. I was like, wow, I really like how it's not that big of a part of the story, but I just thought it was really well crafted. In general, I really was quite impressed by this book. I've liked everything that this author has written, but this one just managed to have so many pieces of this character's life, even though you get told about a lot of her life over the course of this one book. I still felt like I really felt connected to her. And that's a hard thing to accomplish in a story that covers a large period of time, because of course, then you feel like you're getting cliff notes. But I didn't really feel like that with her at all. I just really felt connected to her. I really liked her as a character, and I thought the stakes were well established. I thought the moral conundrums were really well done. And as far as retellings go, because I think we're kind of finally coming away from the retelling as a popular device, but I thought that as far as retellings go, this one has so much to offer, and it also introduced me to a story that I wasn't as familiar with before. So I really, obviously, liked this one. It's in my top 3. But I really, really quite enjoyed this, and the horror elements I felt were less present than in this author's other works. I think that House of Salt and Sorrows and that series, and also Small Favors, I thought were creepier than this one. This one, it was more of just the grim fairy tale feel more than horror. So just to ensure that expectations are correct. But regardless, that's it for my top 3, and it turned out fantasy books, backlist fantasy books that I picked up in the second quarter of the year. I thought that these were all phenomenal in their own ways, but very different from each other, which is always so exciting, because I do feel like it shows what fantasy has to offer. If you've read any of these, or maybe if you even haven't, but just based off of what I said, have some recommendations, feel free to leave them. I find I end up getting so many great recommendations from all of you, and I do like trying to kind of connect in that sense of reading things that you all like. So feel free to leave those or your thoughts about these in general. If you haven't checked these out, but you're interested in them, I will have the books themselves linked in the description bar, as well as if I have more in-depth reviews or discussions, I'll have those linked too. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.